excited. Right now we have Sam Jolman, a good friend of Training Ground, and has been a counselor here in Colorado Springs for the last 9 years. Has his master's in Christian counseling from Reformed Theological Seminary in Orlando, and comes every summer and speaks on story and the importance of knowing our stories to our Training Ground guys. So Sam, it's great being with you.
It's great to be here.
Brett, our other director, says that your story is important and it's worthy to be told. And I love that line because it's, even with the guys that we walk through with every summer, it's always a process of telling and retelling and exploring and discovering, even that part where, I feel like the 12-week program is so much of discovering your own story. And it's so important, it's so important to not only know your story, but know also how to tell your story. And so, there are guys that are, listening in on this video series right now, that, probably right after they finish watching this piece on story, will be asked to share their story. And so I would love, maybe some bullet points on like, what are some kind of practical ways to walk through, kind of maybe like lining out on a piece of paper, like, how do I tell my story? Is it just the facts? Is it, or is it saying, the emotional process of I was hurt by this girl, or I had this hard situation, or how do you piece all that together if you're, this is kind of a new process for you?
Yeah, I think you said it well. A lot of times when people approach their story, they think of the facts, and they might say, well, this, my dad was an alcoholic, my mom worked, I lived in Michigan, and it's kind of a list of facts, and it's pretty boring, and probably even for them to tell it, they're like, is that what you wanted?
Is that it? Yeah.
Yeah, is that it? And as I said, God doesn't write boring stories. So to start with, if you're bored with what you're saying, it's probably not the full story.
Right.
And in many ways, it's if you just stay in the facts, it's kind of like watching a movie with the sound off.
Right.
You probably see what happens, but the drama and the experience of it is lost. So you said it right. You've got to begin to ask, what did I feel?
Sure.
So there's what happens to us, but then there's how we felt about it.
Sure.
And that's where you begin to get into meaning.
That's good.
What did it mean to you?
Right.
What did it mean to you that your dad was an alcoholic?
Right.
What did it mean to you that your mother worked all the time? What did it feel like to grow up in Michigan? What did it feel like to be, an only child?
Right.
That you start to ask the deeper question of how did you experience the facts of your life? Usually, we start with general statements, kind of like I said. Father was an alcoholic.
Right.
You've got to move from general to specific, or as our friend Jan Myers-Proet says, a lot of people tell their stories with headlines. Here's the headline, as if I'm reading a newspaper. Dad was an alcoholic. It's a headline.
Right.
And the goal is we have to move from headlines to subheadings to text.
Right.
Text is, tell me a story about a night when your dad came home drunk.
Right.
Tell me the most significant time you remember.
Right.
Of being left home alone while your mother was working.
Right.
Tell me what you loved about Michigan. Tell me a time when you loved the setting you lived in.
Sure.
That kind of thing. It's in the details that you're going to really hear the drama of somebody's story.
That's good.
And that's really where you're going to be able to hear how it really experienced it, what it really meant to you.
Sure. So you're saying like sharing the event, but then also sharing the second part of how that made you feel is a really, really core piece to what your story is about.
And obviously that can be kind of a cheesy question.
Sure.
How did you feel about that? And it's a pretty typical kind of counselor question.
Yeah.
But emotion is the language of our hearts. So if you're going to tune into the heart of what happened, you've got to listen to the language of the emotion.
Right. That's great. Like as you're kind of saying this, the things that come to my mind are, probably most of us didn't grow up with older men being willing to share their story. Some of the reason that this may feel awkward is the fact that like we don't have a lot of models of older men being honest and vulnerable about their lives. That being said, as well, probably one thing that we've seen with the guys in Training Ground is that the importance of telling your story to your brothers, guys your own age, is how that builds you relationally. In other words, oh, you had a similar experience with your dad, or you had a similar experience in school or with a girl, that, as you kind of tell your story to guys your own age, how you can relate emotionally, relationally to certain, events that were very, very similar.
You've got to have people who sit with you and listen to your story with you. Right. Obviously, those need to be people you trust. And not only people you trust who will listen well, but people who will listen for detail. They'll listen for when you gloss over something.
Right.
They'll see tears that come to your eyes. Obviously, that could be a counselor, somebody trained to sit with people as they tell their stories. It doesn't have to be. I mean, it could be just a good buddy that you just trust really well, who just listens well, right. who will in many ways empathize with you,
right.
And also catch you when you gloss over something, when you minimize something. It's so hard to be kind to ourselves when we tell our stories.
Right.
A really easy way to jump into your story would be to just think of the top 5 best events of your life, and then think of the top 5 worst events of your life, and literally make a list. So literally make a bullet point list of those events, whatever they are, even if they seem kind of stupid at first. Like, well, it's kind of stupid. There's not really anything important in that. Just write it down. Then take one of each and write it out. Maybe literally write it out in give yourself 1,000 words. Or just tell that story as a narrative. So you've got a bullet point. So maybe it would be like winning the state championship in basketball when you were a senior. Right. And it's just a moment of great joy that you'll never forget what that felt like. So tell that story.
Even with, guys with Training Ground, we'll have them share their story week 1, but we'll have guys that come back to us and say, hey, can I share, my story again at week 6 or 7? And, some of that we kind of feel like is that guys are afraid to share parts of it, which we totally get. There are shameful places, there's embarrassing places, embarrassing stories that we have in our life that we don't want to share. And we totally get that, but the thing that we're always continually encouraging them, understanding that, you can share those stories. This is a safe, environment. You're in great relationships here. We're not going to shame you for that experience. And also, one of the things that we encourage them with is that almost the more honest you can be and the more vulnerable you can be, the payoff in terms of how, the healing and the freedom that will come because of that, they're proportional. So you share more, there's a good chance that you're going to feel more free.
Yeah. Evil loves silence and secrets. Evil really doesn't want you to do this. Evil, Satan, would love for you to never tell your story.
That's good.
Because then Satan can do whatever he wants
behind closed doors with your story.
Yeah. He can make you feel shame for things and really take you out. It's when you take the risk of telling your story and breaking the silence that you really begin to break the power of evil over your life. So some of why it's scary is because, you are breaking the power of evil over your life by telling your story. Right. The other thing is, there's often a lot of pain. A lot of the stuff that we don't talk about is the painful stuff or the shameful stuff.
Right.
The pain can be scary. Shame can be scary. What if I don't come out the other side?
Right. Right.
What if I just break down and never get it together?
Stop breathing. Yeah, I get it. Yeah.
I had a counselor one time saying, "Yeah, it'll feel like it's gonna kill you, but it won't."
It's true.